Hey everyone, it's the Haunting Hour here. Before we jump into today's video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And if you have any thoughts on the stories in this video, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I always love hearing your feedback. Now let's get into the terrifying story. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you all have an awesome day. I never planned on moving out to the country. It just sort of happened. I'd been living in the city for years, working as a freelance architectural drafter, spending more time behind screens than I ever did in daylight. After a health scare that turned out to be nothing, my doctor suggested I try getting out of the stress and noise. Maybe spend some time somewhere quieter. I didn't exactly take it as a prescription, but when a friend of mine offered to sublet his late uncle's house for a few months, I figured it couldn't hurt. The place was about 3 hours outside of town, nestled at the end of an overgrown gravel road that barely showed up on GPS. The house itself was old, too old to feel cozy, but not quite decaying. One story, long and narrow, with creaky floorboards and windows that rattled in the wind. What got to me the most, though, was the land around it. It sat just above a dense patch of woods that sloped down into a shallow ravine. I'd asked my friend about it before I arrived, and he called it the ditch. I thought that was a weird name for what looked like a collapsed forest path. He warned me not to go wandering too far past it. "There's old runoff down there," he said, "and sometimes things wash up." At the time, I thought he meant trash. For the first week or so, I actually liked the solitude. There was no cell service, barely any internet, and I kept the TV off most days. I started reading again, something I hadn't done in years. I cooked actual meals instead of ordering takeout. At night, I'd sit on the back porch with a drink and just listen. You don't realize how loud cities are until you spend time somewhere that's genuinely silent. At first, it was calming, so quiet it felt like I could hear my own blood moving. But that stillness didn't stay peaceful for long. It started with something small. One night, I noticed all the crickets stopped chirping at once. No wind, no animals, just dead air. Then, the next night, I heard something moving in the ditch. Not a deer, not a raccoon, something slower, deliberate. I couldn't see it from the porch, too many trees in the way, but I could tell it was pacing the bottom of the ravine. It didn't make sense. It was after midnight. What kind of animal walks in a straight line for nearly an hour? I didn't sleep much that night. A couple of days later, I found something on my morning walk. A set of prints in the mud near the edge of the ditch. They weren't deep, but the pattern disturbed me. Long, narrow steps. No shoe tread, just vaguely human-shaped impressions, like bare feet. I tried convincing myself it was a deer, or some kind of animal with a weird gait. But then I saw the drag marks. Each set of prints was followed by 2 long lines in the mud, as if something had been pulling itself forward or dragging something heavy behind it. That same day, I started noticing changes in the air. It wasn't just quiet anymore. It was wrong, like the silence was thick, pressurized. When I'd walk too close to the ditch, my ears would pop like I was changing altitude. The kind of pressure that makes your skin crawl before you even know why. And then there was the smell. Sour, like stagnant water and burnt leaves. But only near the ditch. The rest of the woods smelled like spring. I started avoiding the trail after that, but the ditch didn't avoid me. The worst night came about 2 weeks into my stay. It was just after 2 a.m., and I was sitting up in bed, unable to sleep. The air in the house felt damp and heavy, and I could hear the wind creaking the old boards of the back deck. That's when I heard it again. The same dragging steps I'd heard from the porch. But this time, they weren't down in the ditch. They were right outside my bedroom window. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The sound was slow, like someone or something was taking its time, circling the house. My bedroom window faced the woods, and I'd left the blinds open that night. I don't know why. I usually kept them shut. Through the window, I couldn't see much, just the vague outline of the trees and the moonlight glinting off the glass. Then something moved. Just past the edge of the window, something shifted against the light. Tall, slumped. It didn't walk so much as sway, like it had too many joints in the wrong places. I stayed perfectly still, hoping it couldn't see me, and then somehow it turned its head. I didn't see its face, not exactly, just the shape of it, long and narrow, like a stretched-out skull. No clear eyes, no visible features, but I swear it looked right at me. It pressed a hand against the glass, 5 long, spindly fingers that bent in unnatural ways. Its palm left a smear, like something black and oily. I didn't move, didn't scream, I just stared. It tilted its head slowly, almost curious, and then lowered its hand. I thought it would smash the window. I thought it would come in, but it didn't. It just walked away, dragging its legs through the grass, disappearing back into the woods. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed in the living room with all the lights on, clutching a fire poker like it would make any difference. I told myself I'd leave the next morning, pack up and get the hell out. But when morning came, I was too tired, too numb. I stayed another day. That was my biggest mistake. Over the next week, I tried to convince myself it had just been a dream, a waking nightmare brought on by isolation. But the signs kept coming. More prints around the house, scratches on the back door, too high up to be any animal. That oily smear on the bedroom window never dried. It stayed wet looking, no matter how often I wiped it. And then I started hearing whispers. Not voices exactly, more like breath being pulled across stone. The sound would start in the distance and draw closer, as if something were calling out from the ditch. Always at night, always just as I was drifting off. I stopped opening the windows. I stopped going outside after sunset. The woods around the ditch began to feel alive in a way I couldn't explain. Like they were watching, like they were waiting. One morning I woke up to find dead birds scattered around the yard. No wounds, no blood, just lying there, eyes open, necks twisted. I counted 13 of them. I didn't bury them, I just stood there, heart pounding, and waited until the smell of them forced me back inside. It all came to a head on the last night I spent there. Around midnight, the power went out. No storm, no warning, just sudden, absolute darkness. I grabbed my flashlight and tried the breaker, but it hadn't tripped. That's when I heard the dragging again, closer than ever, right outside the front door. The beam of the flashlight was weak, barely reaching the base of the stairs. I moved slowly to the peephole and looked out. Nothing. Then a knock. Slow, deliberate, not loud. Just 3 taps. Then silence. I backed away, heart hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. Then I heard it again, this time at the back door. 3 more taps. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the fire poker again, and waited. No more sounds. Just the same crushing silence I'd come to dread. I stayed there until dawn, listening. When the sun rose, I opened the door. There was a symbol drawn in the dirt on my front step, a spiral surrounded by crude handprints, and in the middle of it was one of those dead birds, impaled on a twig. I left that morning. I didn't pack, I didn't clean. I got in my car and drove until the gaslight came on. When I finally stopped, I was 4 towns away. I rented a motel room and didn't leave it for 2 days. Eventually, I called my friend and told him I'd had an emergency. I gave him the keys and told him I wouldn't be back. I never told him what happened. I doubt he'd have believed me. It's been 2 years since then. I live in a condo now. No trees, no ditches, just concrete and traffic and noise. I sleep with a white noise machine and blackout curtains. I haven't heard the dragging again. Not yet. But sometimes I dream about the handprint, and when I wake up, I can still smell the ditch, that sour, muddy stench that clings to everything. I haven't gone back. I never will. And if you're ever out that way, on Route 27, near the tree line just before the river, don't stop when you see the broken mailbox with the rusted chain-link fence, because that's where the ditch begins, and something still lives there, waiting. I never liked riding trains at night. There's something about the motion, the dim interior lights, and the strange stillness between stations that makes me uneasy. It's like being suspended in time, stuck between places in a metal box you can't escape until it decides to let you out. That anxiety only grew worse after what happened to me last fall. Something I haven't talked about with anyone. Not because I'm scared they won't believe me, but because I'm scared they will. That they'll hear what I'm about to tell you and recognize the same thing, the same sound. It started on a Friday. I'd been visiting my mom out in Larchmont for the weekend, a quiet rural town where the roads were always wet and the streetlights flickered like dying bugs. The train back to the city didn't run often, and I'd missed the earlier one because she insisted on making dinner. I didn't argue. I hadn't seen her in months, and she always looked so worried when I talked about how tired I'd been lately. So I stayed for one more meal and ended up catching the last train out. 9:17 p.m., Platform 3. The station was empty except for a vending machine humming in the corner and the old man who worked the booth. I boarded the rear car, thinking I'd have more room to myself. I didn't see a single person inside, which was normal for that time. But the second the doors shut, I felt off. Like I'd stepped into something that hadn't been touched in a long time. The lights were dimmer than usual. The air felt colder, damp even, and everything smelled faintly of rust and wet gravel. I picked a seat near the middle of the car and sat with my backpack at my feet, phone in my hand, earbuds ready, the usual routine. We pulled out of the station with that familiar metallic groan, the lights outside blurring into long streaks as the countryside slipped past. I stared out the window for a while, then looked around the carriage again. Still empty. No conductor, no other passengers. I figured I'd lucked out. A quiet ride meant I could finally relax. But about 20 minutes in, I started feeling strange. I wasn't sick exactly, but my head felt heavy, like I was slowly drifting out of my body. My thoughts started looping. My arms felt numb. I chalked it up to exhaustion. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes. That's when I first heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound, almost too faint to notice. I thought it was just the train gliding over the tracks. But the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't mechanical. It was organic. A gentle, pulsing sound that came in waves, like water moving over sand, like waves crashing softly. But we weren't anywhere near the coast. I opened my eyes and sat up. The sound stopped immediately. At first, I laughed at myself. I was probably dozing off and dreamed it, but something in the back of my mind wouldn't let go. I took out one earbud and sat still, listening. Nothing. Just the distant hum of the engine and the faint creak of the car shifting on the rails. I checked my phone. No service. I flipped through a few photos from earlier that day, just to ground myself. Then, behind me, I heard something shift. Not a sound this time. Movement. A faint creak, like someone adjusting their weight against the seat. I turned around slowly. The carriage was still empty. No one. But I could feel it now. That presence. Not the paranoid kind, not just nerves. I knew deep in my gut that I wasn't alone anymore. And then I noticed something else. The window across from me, just above the empty row of seats, had started to fog up from the inside. There was a single breath mark, like someone had exhaled against it. But there was no one sitting there. I stared at that fogged up patch, not blinking, barely breathing. I waited for it to fade, for it to disappear and prove me wrong. Prove I was tired, imagining things. But it stayed. Still, perfectly circular, slightly distorted by condensation. Then something inside it moved. Just a streak at first. A smear from the inside, as if someone ran a finger down through the breath mark. Slowly, deliberately. Not across, but down, from top to bottom. I stood up so fast I knocked my knee against the metal bar in front of me. The pain barely registered. I turned in a circle, scanning the entire carriage. Still empty. My breathing quickened. I grabbed my bag and moved to a seat further up the car. I didn't want to panic. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone was in the next carriage, maybe it was a ventilation issue, maybe I had just drifted off and dreamed it. That's when I saw the luggage rack. Near the back of the carriage, where I'd been sitting, was one of those overhead racks meant for small bags or coats. I hadn't looked up when I sat down before. I hadn't thought to, but now I did, and I saw it. Lying flat on the rack, impossibly still as if it had melted into the structure, was a person. At least, I think it was a person. Its limbs were bent awkwardly to fit, bones pressing against fabric in strange ways. It wore what looked like a faded gray coat, frayed at the sleeves. Its skin was pale, almost bluish, stretched too tightly across its face. And it was looking at me. Not just facing me, watching me. Eyes wide, unblinking, milky white irises that didn't reflect the light. Its mouth was moving, very slowly, and the sound started again. That same pulsing rhythm. Not water, not anymore. It was the sound of breathing forced through teeth, of something mimicking waves, like it had heard the ocean once and was trying to recreate it with its throat. I couldn't move. My body refused to respond. My heart was slamming in my chest, and my vision narrowed, tunneled. Then it blinked. Not both eyes, just one. And I ran. I don't remember how I got to the next carriage. I must have hit the emergency button, or maybe the door opened automatically. All I remember is fumbling through the doorway, falling hard onto the floor of the next car, scraping my palms on the ribbed metal. This one was empty too. Of course it was. The entire train might have been empty. The doors closed behind me. I scrambled up and turned, but the thing wasn't there anymore. The rack was empty. The fogged window, gone. I backed into a seat and gripped the armrest so tightly my knuckles popped. I sat there until the next station, breathing hard, staring at the door in case it opened again. When the train finally arrived at my stop, I got off without looking back. I didn't care how far I had to walk. I didn't care that it was dark. I just needed to be off that train, away from it. But it wasn't over. It followed me home. That night, I barely slept. I kept the lights on in every room. Every creak of the apartment made me flinch. I tried to write it all off as a hallucination, stress, fatigue, maybe even a waking dream. But just before 3 a.m., I heard something again. That sound. The ocean that wasn't the ocean. It started faint, like a breath being dragged through a hollow tube, and slowly grew louder. I followed it to the living room, heart thudding, every nerve in my body taut like a wire. I didn't want to, but I had to know. I had to be sure. The sound was coming from my phone. I picked it up and checked the screen. No calls, no notifications, nothing. But the sound was definitely coming from the speaker. I turned it over in my hand, and on the screen, for just a second, I saw it, a reflection. Not mine, his. I dropped the phone. It hit the carpet and went silent. I backed away, stumbling over the coffee table, knocking over a lamp. I sat in the hallway for the rest of the night, back against the wall, lights on, waiting for the sun to rise. In the weeks that followed, things didn't get better. I started seeing shapes and reflective surfaces. My bathroom mirror fogged up when I hadn't used the shower. Sometimes late at night, I'd find fingerprints on my windows, long ones. Then, once, I came home to find my phone's recording app open. A file had been saved. I didn't remember recording anything, but when I played it back, I heard the same whispering rhythm, like waves breaking over bone. And underneath it, faint but clear, was my own voice, repeating something in a tone I didn't recognize, over and over. I didn't remember saying any of it, and I couldn't understand the words, but I knew what they meant. He's still here. Back when I was 17, my high school history class took an overnight trip to a remote rural preserve in northern Oregon. It was part of some pilot program the district was running. Immersive environmental education, or something like that. The idea was that we'd spend a weekend learning about local land use and forest conservation. But honestly, Most of us were just excited to get away from home for 2 days without our parents. There were about 30 of us total, and the teachers had arranged for us to stay at an old group lodge near the edge of a decommissioned nature preserve. We were told it had once been part of a logging settlement from the early 1900s. The building itself was 2 stories tall and made entirely of dark cedar wood with an A-frame roof and small square windows. It sat deep in the forest, a good half-mile hike from the nearest gravel road. No cell signal, no Wi-Fi, and definitely no stores nearby. We were completely cut off for the weekend. The first night passed without anything unusual. We set up our bunks, made dinner, and played board games in the rec room until lights out. But on the second day, something happened. Something I still don't understand. The morning started with a group hike, but it didn't go as planned. About halfway down the trail, I ended up twisting my ankle on a loose patch of gravel and had to head back with another girl named Lena while the rest of the class continued. She wasn't in my close friend group, but she was nice, quiet, smart, and always carried a small sketch pad around with her. The teacher gave us a trail map and told us to take it slow and stick together. We followed the marked path for a while, talking about random things to pass the time. The forest was quiet that day, unusually quiet actually. No birds, no rustling. The air had this strange pressure to it, like when a storm's about to break. At some point, we passed a trail marker we didn't recognize. I remember stopping and frowning at it. The letters on the wooden post were half rotted, but I think it said West Property Line. Neither of us remembered seeing it on the way out. That's when we noticed a side trail, barely visible, half covered by undergrowth. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. We probably should have just turned around, but something about that hidden path felt weirdly familiar, like déjà vu. I felt drawn to it, like it was trying to remind me of something I'd forgotten. Lena must have felt the same, because she stepped onto it first without saying a word, and I followed. We didn't speak for several minutes. The trail narrowed quickly, trees closing in on either side until the sunlight barely touched the dirt. Eventually, the path opened into a small clearing, and at the far end of it stood a structure. It wasn't on the map. It looked like an old caretaker's cabin, low roof, leaning slightly to the left, the wood gone gray with age. Ivy and moss covered most of the exterior, and the windows were too dusty to see through. The front door was crooked on its hinges, slightly ajar. I don't know why we went inside. Neither of us said it out loud, but it was like we were being pulled toward it. Like stepping out of the woods into that clearing had flipped a switch in our heads. The cabin was cold. Not just chilly. Cold in a way that sank into your bones. There was barely any furniture inside. Just a rusted wood stove, a cracked sink with a dry spigot, and a small table with 2 chairs that looked ready to fall apart. But the thing that stood out most was the mirror. It was the only object that didn't seem weathered or decayed. A tall, freestanding mirror in a black wooden frame, taller than either of us, propped up against the far wall. The glass was perfectly clean, untouched, as if someone had just placed it there. We didn't move for a long time. Lena stood closest, maybe 3 or 4 feet away. I was by the door. She tilted her head and stared at it like she was seeing something I couldn't. And then she whispered something that made my skin crawl. "Is that me?" I stepped forward and looked at her reflection. But something was wrong. It wasn't that the image didn't match. It was Lena, down to the freckles on her cheeks and the way she held her arms close to her body. But there was a distortion. A slight lag, like the mirror was reacting half a second too slow, and then it started to change. A red line appeared beneath her eye. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but it deepened. It became a scratch. Then another line crossed her cheek. Her mouth in the reflection began to droop at the corners, like it was melting. Her real mouth didn't move. Lena's breathing quickened. She took a step back. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. and then we both heard it. A voice, faint, coming from behind the mirror, like someone whispering just on the other side of the glass. We ran. We didn't look back as we crashed through the forest, branches tearing at our arms and legs. It took us nearly an hour to find the main trail again, and by then the rest of the group had already returned. Our teacher scolded us, but we barely registered it. We were both too shaken. That night, neither of us said much. We pretended to sleep. I lay in my bunk, facing the wall, heart racing. At some point past midnight, I heard footsteps creaking outside the bunk room. Slow, deliberate. I told myself it was the teacher doing a check-in, but the footsteps stopped right outside our door. Then I heard something else. A sound like fingernails tapping on glass. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Lena was gone. No one knew when she left. Her bunk was empty, but the blanket was still warm. Her boots were gone. Her sketchbook was still there, lying open on the mattress. The last drawing was a face. It looked like her, but the mouth was stretched too wide and the eyes were black pits. Lines crisscrossed the face like deep cuts. I took the sketchbook and kept it hidden in my bag. I don't know why. I didn't want anyone to throw it away. Search teams scoured the woods for 3 days. They found nothing. No tracks, no scent trail, no personal belongings. She had vanished. Everyone assumed she ran away. I knew better, and I never told anyone about the mirror. A week after we got home, strange things started happening. First, my bedroom mirror cracked, right down the center. I hadn't touched it. It just split. Then I started hearing that same sound again, tapping, like fingernails, but always when I was just about to fall asleep. The worst part happened on a Sunday morning. I woke up to find my closet door slightly open. Inside, every single mirror I'd ever owned, compact, hand mirror, even an old photo frame, had been moved from their usual places and arranged inside the closet, all facing outward. All of them had scratches across the glass. Thin, red ones, like they'd been carved with a blade. And in the center of the floor was Lena's sketchbook, but I had locked it in my desk drawer. When I was 16, my older brother came home after being gone for over 2 years. His name was Noah. He'd run away when he was 19 and didn't leave a note. Didn't take much with him. Just disappeared one night while my parents were asleep. I remembered waking up that morning to Mom crying in the kitchen, holding his empty duffel bag. The police tried to help, but nothing ever turned up. No sightings, no calls. It was like he'd vanished completely. Then one Tuesday evening, out of nowhere, he showed up on our porch. I was alone in the house. My parents were working late, and I was upstairs doing homework when I heard a knock. Not a polite knock either. It was frantic, desperate, like someone who was terrified of being outside. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in months. His skin was pale, dry, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was thinner, but not in the way you'd expect, like something had hollowed him out from the inside. The second he saw me, he shoved past into the house and locked the door behind him. His hands were trembling. He looked around the living room like he was expecting someone to follow him in. I tried to say his name, but he just stared at me, breathing heavy, eyes wide. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "Don't let me be alone, please." I was too stunned to say anything. I helped him sit on the couch and got him some water. He barely drank it. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. I asked him where he'd been, what happened, why he left. But he didn't answer at first. Just kept looking out the window like he expected something to crawl out of the dark. Eventually he said, "They wait for you. That's all they do. Just wait." That was the first time he mentioned them. My parents got home about an hour later, and I don't think I'll ever forget the sound my mom made when she saw him. I think some part of her had stopped believing he was alive. My dad just stood there, hand covering his mouth, like if he spoke too loud, Noah might vanish again. They didn't ask questions at first. just hugged him and cried. But after things settled down, they tried. Noah didn't offer much. He just said he got out and couldn't stay there any longer. That was it. He refused to sleep alone. That night, he begged to sleep in my room, said he'd take the floor. I agreed. I kept the light on. I stayed awake as long as I could, and I swear I saw him bolt upright at least 3 times, eyes wide, panting like something had been chasing him in his dreams. But every time I asked if he was okay, he just said, "Don't let them find me again." I didn't know what to make of it. At first, I thought maybe he'd been living on the street, or maybe gotten caught up with some cult or something. But by the 3rd day, I started to realize this was something else. Something worse. He kept checking reflections, not mirrors, but windows, glass, even polished doorknobs. If he passed one, he'd pause and stare into it like he expected to see something other than his own face. And if the reflection lingered too long, he'd turn it around or cover it up. By the 5th night, there wasn't a single uncovered mirror in the house. And then came the whispers. It started in the early morning hours, just after 3. I'd wake up to the sound of something brushing against my door. Not knocking, not scratching, just movement. I'd lay there frozen, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was the heater or the wind. But then I'd hear it again, this time from the closet or from behind the dresser. And once, I swear, I heard my name whispered so softly it barely registered. That morning, I asked Noah if he heard anything weird in the night. He didn't answer. He just looked at me and said, "If you hear them say your name, don't answer." Later that day, I found something strange under his bed, a journal. Most of it was unreadable, smeared ink, torn out pages, but the parts that remained sent chills down my spine. One sentence kept repeating, page after page. They wait in the places you forget. I started paying attention after that, watching him more closely. And the more I watched, the more convinced I became that something had followed him back. Not a person, not even something alive in the normal sense. Something that existed just outside of what we could see, like shadows behind frosted glass. One night, I woke up to a sound, a faint humming, low and distant, like a chant with no words. I sat up and looked around, and that's when I saw him. Noah was standing in front of my closet, completely still, arms at his sides. His head was tilted back, and his eyes were rolled up toward the ceiling. I called his name. No response. I got out of bed, walked over to him, and gently touched his shoulder. The moment I did, he gasped and stumbled backward like he'd just surfaced from underwater. And then he whispered, "They found me." After that night, everything got worse. He refused to eat, barely drank water, sat in the living room for hours at a time, staring at the blank television. One night, I found him trying to scratch something off his skin, these tiny blue marks that had started appearing on his wrists and neck, almost like bruises but darker. I told my parents he needed help, but they were convinced it was trauma. Said we should be patient, that he just needed time, but I knew better. On the 8th night, I woke up to find my bedroom door wide open. I checked the clock, 3:12 a.m. My heart was already pounding before I got out of bed. I walked down the hallway to his room. Empty. The window was open. I ran outside. That's when I saw him, standing barefoot in the backyard, head tilted back, arms slightly raised like he was listening to something in the sky. And surrounding him, in the shadows beyond the tree line, were dozens of tall, thin shapes. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, watching as the shapes drifted closer, almost floating, their bodies shimmering faintly in the dark with a strange blue hue. They didn't walk. They didn't speak. They didn't even seem solid. Like they were made of smoke and water and static all at once. One of them extended an arm. It didn't touch him, just hovered near his shoulder. Then Noah turned his head and looked at me, and he smiled. But it wasn't his smile. I know that sounds insane, but I swear to you, it wasn't the way he used to smile. It was cold, detached, like whoever was behind those eyes didn't recognize me. Then he said one thing, You shouldn't have opened the door. And just like that, they were gone. The police searched for weeks. They found no sign of him. Again, it was like he'd never come back in the first place. His footprints in the dirt ended abruptly, as if he'd been lifted out of the world entirely. The only thing left behind was the journal. I still have it. I don't know why. The blue marks started showing up on my wrists a few weeks later. Faint at first, easy to ignore. But sometimes at night, I see them watching me from the window. Tall, silent, waiting. And the worst part? They look patient, like they know I'll come to them eventually. When I was 13, I lived way out in the hills of Montana with my dad. We were 5 miles from the nearest paved road, and the closest house was a hunting cabin 2 ridges over that only saw visitors in the fall. My mom had passed away when I was 9, and after that, Dad couldn't stand the city anymore. He packed us up and moved us to the middle of nowhere. Said he needed the quiet. But for me, the quiet was suffocating. My school was entirely online. And even though I could email classmates or post on the message boards, it wasn't the same. The kind of loneliness that sets in when you're 13 and have no one to talk to. It's different. It's sharp in a way you don't forget. Dad noticed eventually. He was good that way. He bought me a refurbished tablet for my birthday that came with a SIM card and a data plan. Not great service out where we were, but enough for texting. Enough to feel like I existed somewhere outside our cabin. I downloaded one of those pen pal apps. It seemed harmless enough, just a way to talk to other kids stuck in small towns, looking for people who understood. I didn't post a photo or anything, just a message on my profile that said I liked hiking, photography, and creepy stories. Within a day, someone messaged me. The username was "Someone Else Out Here." That's what caught me first. That username. It felt familiar in a strange way, like it had been pulled from a dream I'd forgotten. The message was short. "Hey, you feel real. Most people don't. Want to talk?" I didn't know how to respond to something like that, but after staring at it for a few minutes, I wrote back. "Sure. I feel alone a lot. Maybe that's close enough." That first conversation lasted almost 4 hours. We didn't talk about much, mostly music, TV shows, how weird and quiet rural life could be. But there was a rhythm to it that clicked with me. The messages weren't fast, but they were thoughtful. Every reply made me feel seen, and they were funny, sharp in a way I hadn't expected. I felt understood in a way I hadn't in years. We messaged every day after that. Sometimes just a few texts. Other times, we'd stay up into the early morning talking about what scared us, what we hoped for, the way we both hated being stared at by deer. I never got their real name. They said it didn't matter. But they always knew things about me, stuff I hadn't told them yet. Like what time I usually went to bed, or what the woods looked like outside my window. I figured I must have posted something on social media I'd forgotten. I wanted to believe it was just coincidence. But then came the call. One night I got a message. "Want to hear what I sound like?" I hesitated, then said yeah. My tablet started ringing almost immediately. I didn't even know the app had a call function. The screen dimmed, then flickered for a second before stabilizing. The voice on the other end was low, calm, too calm for a teenager. It wasn't robotic or inhuman. It was worse. It was human in all the wrong ways. Perfect cadence, no stumbles, no background noise, just a smooth, steady tone that said my name like it had been practicing for weeks. We talked for 20 minutes, or at least, they talked. I barely said a word. I remember feeling cold halfway through the call, like something had passed through the room. I could see my breath, and the line crackled softly, like old tape. When I hung up, I realized I couldn't remember a single thing they'd said. Not one sentence. That night, I had a dream. In the dream, I was standing in the woods behind our house. The trees were silent. No wind, no birds. Just rows of dark trunks stretching on forever. I was holding the tablet in my hands, even though I knew I hadn't brought it outside. I heard my name again, the same voice from the call, only now it was coming from every direction. It didn't echo. It folded in on itself. A whisper turned inside out. Then I saw something move between the trees. A shape, tall but wrong in its proportions. I couldn't see details, just a silhouette, as if the night itself had decided to stand up and walk. It raised a hand and pointed at me. I woke up, choking on my breath, tablet buzzing on my nightstand. There was a message. "You heard me, right?" After that, things started to change in the house. Our landline would ring at 2 a.m., and when I picked it up, there'd be nothing on the other end except the sound of breathing. Slow and steady. Not frantic, not menacing, just listening. The tablet started turning on by itself, even when I powered it off. Once I watched the screen flash and flicker, then open the app all on its own. The chat window was already there. A new message blinked on the screen. "You're not alone anymore." I tried to delete the app. It came back the next day. I reset the tablet. It reinstalled itself within minutes. I finally told my dad, but when he looked, the app was gone. Nothing in the downloads folder, nothing in the OS. He told me I was dreaming, that I needed more sunlight. But I knew the truth. Whatever it was, it wanted me to feel safe, like it was helping. That was the part that scared me the most. One night, I tried something desperate. I opened the app and typed, "What do you want from me?" The reply came instantly. "To be with you." I stared at the screen, hands shaking, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I typed again, "Why me?" There was a long pause, the longest it had ever gone silent. Then, you answered. I dropped the tablet. It slid off the bed and landed hard, screen cracking at the corner. I didn't pick it up again. That night, I unplugged it, put it in a drawer, and pushed a dresser in front of it. But at 3 a.m., I woke to see the screen glowing through the crack in the drawer. The dreams got worse. I'd see myself standing in front of a mirror that wasn't really a mirror, more like a window. And on the other side was the same shape I'd seen in the woods, but it wasn't mimicking me anymore. It was standing still while I moved, watching, studying. Sometimes I'd wake up and find the tablet moved to my bed. Once I found it in the woodshed out back, powered on, app open, waiting. Then came the night it spoke through my room speakers. I was asleep when the Bluetooth speaker across the room buzzed, then clicked on. The same calm voice whispered, "Come outside, it's time." I screamed loud enough to wake my dad. He burst in, confused, half asleep, shotgun in hand. I pointed at the speaker, but it was off, silent. The next morning, the speaker was fried, completely dead. I threw the tablet in the creek behind our house. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't check to see if it was still on. I just waited until the current pulled it out of sight and went back to the house shaking. For a while, it was quiet. A whole week passed without dreams. No messages, no strange sounds. I started to hope maybe I'd broken the connection, that it had needed the device to get close. But on the 7th night, I found something waiting on my pillow. Not a note, not a message. It was a small black SIM card. I don't own any other devices. I should start by saying I loved my wife more than anything. That's important to understand. We'd been together for 8 years and married for 5. I knew her habits, her quirks, the way she hummed when she cooked, or how she always left the bedroom window cracked open just enough to let in the night air. She was grounded, a realist, the kind of person who didn't buy into superstitions, didn't read horoscopes, didn't even like horror movies. She liked her world neat, controlled, understood. Which is why, when she started talking about the dreams, I paid attention. She never remembered them fully. Just flashes at first. A cold hallway. A light that flickered in ways it shouldn't. Someone standing just behind her but never visible. She'd wake up with her heart racing, skin damp, staring at the ceiling like she was waiting for something to reappear. At first, I brushed it off as stress. We just moved to a new house 3 months prior, an old craftsman-style place on the edge of a forgotten town. The kind of place with warped floorboards, original glass windows, and a basement that smelled like a root cellar. She loved it, called it character. I was more hesitant, but we got a good deal, and she said the place had soul. The dream started the second week after we moved in. She'd wake me up in the middle of the night, her breath ragged, whispering that she'd seen him again. That's how she referred to whatever was in the dream. Always him. Never a description, just the idea of a presence. She said he stood just beyond the edge of light, like a negative space burned into the room. What worried me wasn't the content of the dreams, it was how they changed her. Within a month, she was barely eating. Her already slender frame began to look unhealthy. She'd sit at the breakfast table, staring into her coffee like she expected to see something inside it. Her eyes were tired all the time, ringed with shadows that seemed too deep for just sleeplessness. I asked her to talk to someone. She refused, said she wasn't sick, just tired, that the dreams were just dreams. But every night, she'd flinch when we turned off the lights. Every night, I'd feel her body tense beside me when the room went quiet. Then she stopped sleeping in the bed altogether. I woke up one night around 3 in the morning and found her sitting in the hallway, facing our full-length mirror. Just sitting, watching her reflection like it was doing something I couldn't see. When I asked her what she was doing, she didn't answer at first. She just pointed to the glass and whispered, "He's closer now." I didn't know what to say. There was no one there, just our reflection. My wife and me standing side by side in the hallway. Only I wasn't standing, I was kneeling, watching her. But in the reflection, I was upright, unmoving. My heart skipped. I blinked and it was gone. My reflection snapped back into place like nothing had happened. But my wife never looked at me. Her eyes stayed locked on the glass. "I think he wants to wear me," she said quietly, "like a suit." I brought her to bed. She didn't resist. But even after she closed her eyes, I knew she wasn't asleep. Her fingers never stopped twitching. The next few days were worse. She started talking to herself when she thought I wasn't around. I'd catch fragments through the doors. "Not yet," or "He's not ready," or "I don't want to see the mirror again." I took down every mirror in the house. She screamed at me, screamed like I'd betrayed her. "You can't stop him from coming," she shouted, eyes wild. "He already knows the path." That night, I called her sister. I told her I didn't know what to do, that I was scared. She said she'd come out the next weekend. I tried to hold on to that, the idea that someone else might confirm what I was seeing, that I wasn't losing my mind. But the night before her sister arrived, something happened. I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. I ran to the hallway and found the door to the guest room wide open. Inside, every shard of a mirror I'd locked away in the closet had been laid out on the bed, like puzzle pieces arranged into a jagged shape. My wife was kneeling at the edge, whispering to it. I pulled her away, bleeding from my hands as I knocked the glass to the floor. She didn't fight me. She just stared up with this strange, blank smile. Not angry, not afraid, just absent. "He told me his name," she said. I asked her what it was. She just laughed and said, "It doesn't sound right in this world." Her sister arrived the next morning and insisted we take her to a clinic. My wife didn't protest. She barely spoke at all, just nodded, smiled, and got into the car. They kept her for evaluation. I wasn't allowed to visit for the first 48 hours. The house was too quiet. I tried to sleep on the couch, but kept waking up, sure I'd heard footsteps in the hallway. When I went to check, the mirror, the big one I'd wrapped in blankets and stored in the garage, was out, uncovered, sitting in the middle of the living room. I ran outside and vomited. That night, I slept in my truck. The next morning, the clinic called. "She's fine," they said, rested, eating again, talking normally. I didn't believe it, but I went to pick her up, and sure enough, she looked better. She hugged me, smiled, said she was sorry for everything. I wanted to believe it. For the first few days I did. But she was different. The way she walked was just slightly off, like her weight shifted in a rhythm that didn't match how people usually move. Her eyes stayed open a bit too long before blinking. She watched her reflection in the windows as we passed by them in the car. Always watching. She never mentioned the dreams again. One night, I found her standing in front of the bathroom mirror, completely still. I watched from the hallway just for a moment, trying not to make a sound. She didn't blink. Her reflection did. I grew up in a small rural town that felt like it had been forgotten by the rest of the world. One gas station, one school, and nothing but pine trees for miles in every direction. We didn't get great reception out there, but I had my phone, and like every other lonely kid in the sticks, I clung to the internet for companionship. It started when I was 14, that weird in-between age where you're not really a child anymore, but no one's taking you seriously either. I had friends at school, sure, but none of them lived nearby. Once I got off the bus and walked the long gravel road home, it was just me, the woods, and whatever I could load on a screen. I wasn't allowed on social media, but I found loopholes. Forums, chat apps, message boards, anywhere someone else might be talking. I wasn't looking for anything dangerous, just a connection, someone who'd talk back. One night, I posted in a teen message thread that had a make new friends section. I wrote something dumb and simple. Hey, I'm bored, 14, anyone want to talk? A reply came within minutes. The username was just 3 numbers, no avatar. The message read, yeah, me too. I don't sleep much anymore. Want to chat? I did. We messaged for an hour that first night. Nothing strange, just music, games, complaining about school. I asked if they were a guy or girl. They said it didn't matter. I asked where they were from. They answered, a quiet place, kinda like where you live. That made me pause. I hadn't said anything about my town. I told myself it was just a coincidence. After all, most small towns feel the same. Over the next few weeks, we chatted almost every night. They never gave me a name, so I called them 3N because of their username. 3N asked a lot of questions, not weird ones, just personal in a casual way. What time I went to sleep, what my room looked like, if I kept my windows open, what kind of things scared me. I answered because it felt good to be seen, to have someone listen that closely. I told 3N about the coyote I heard outside my window one night. I told them about the storm that knocked our power out and how I read scary stories by candlelight. Sometimes their responses gave me chills, like when I said, the woods out here are pitch black at night. Kinda creepy. And they replied, yeah, I can tell. One night, I asked if we could do a voice call. I was nervous, expecting some adult voice that would shatter the illusion, but instead a message came back. Soon, I want to hear yours first. I didn't know what that meant. I joked that my voice was lame. They replied, I already know what it sounds like. I hear you talk in your sleep. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I logged out. The next morning, I told myself it was a joke, just trolling, but a part of me stayed uneasy. That night, I put tape over my webcam and left the bedroom light on, just in case. A few days passed with no word from 3N. I figured it was over. Maybe they got bored. Maybe I overreacted. Then one afternoon, while walking home from the bus stop, I saw it, a shape in the woods, about 30 yards back, standing between the trees. It looked like someone in a hoodie, unmoving, half-shadowed by branches. I stared for a long time, trying to convince myself it was just a stump or shadow. When I finally blinked, it was gone. That night, 3N messaged me again. You looked right at me today. I didn't sleep at all that night. I started keeping the curtains closed and stopped going on that forum. I even deleted the app from my phone, but that didn't stop the messages. They started coming from random numbers, unknown senders, always just one line. Can you hear me now? Or I'm closer tonight. I showed my mom one of them. She told me it was probably just a classmate messing with me. But none of my classmates knew the stories I'd told 3N. None of them would have known to say, "I like the sound your bed makes when you roll over." I finally blocked every number, changed my login, made a new email, even reset the phone entirely. It worked. For a while. Until one night I heard a faint ping. I'd left my phone charging in the kitchen, but the sound hadn't come from there. It came from my room, from under my bed. I slowly knelt down and saw the soft glow of a screen, a phone that wasn't mine, lit up with a message. I reached for it, hand shaking. The message read, "Can I come inside now?" I screamed. My parents didn't believe me. Said it was probably one of my old phones, even though we hadn't found it since I lost it months ago. My mom put the mystery phone in a drawer and told me to forget about it. But every night after that, I dreamed I was staring at a face through my window. Not scary or monstrous, just a blank, wrong face. Like someone trying to imitate being human and missing the details. I started waking up to small things being moved. My closet door cracked open even though I'd closed it. My lamp unplugged. Once the word "soon" scrawled in condensation on the mirror after my shower. The worst came a week later. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. Not vibrating. Buzzing like it was glitching out. I picked it up and saw a new contact had been added. No name. Just a phone emoji. It had already sent a video. I opened it, my stomach dropping. It was a video of me, sleeping, shot from the end of my bed, for 6 full minutes. At the end, the camera moved slightly, like someone was shifting their weight. And the last thing I saw was a pale face leaning into frame. I ran to my parents' room. I begged them to believe me. They called the police. The police found no signs of forced entry, no prints, nothing on security cameras. But the phone? Gone. I don't know how long it had been under my bed. I don't know who or what put it there. All I know is that night I dreamed of the woods, of someone walking between the trees, stopping just outside my window, watching. And when I woke up, a message was carved into the inside of the glass. Talking was fun. Now I'm learning to open you. I was 11, the summer my mom went back to night shifts. My dad was out of the picture by then, so it was just her, me, and my 7-year-old sister, Lydia. We lived in a small, one-story house on the edge of a wooded subdivision. One of those areas where the trees had been cleared just enough for cookie-cutter homes, then left wild and overgrown at the edges. At night, it got really quiet. Like, so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat if you lay still enough. Mom had only been on nights for a couple of weeks, and I was getting used to being in charge while she was gone. I'd cook boxed mac and cheese for Lydia, we'd play card games or watch cartoons, and then I'd make sure she brushed her teeth before bed. It was simple. At least, it was supposed to be. That night started off like any other. It was August, and the heat clung to everything. I remember the way the ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, doing nothing but moving the warm air around. Lydia was in her usual bubbly mood. After dinner, we played a board game, and then she asked if we could play hide and seek before bed. She was obsessed with it lately, and even though I wasn't in the mood, I said yes. Just one round. I told her I'd count in the hallway while she hid. I closed my eyes, pressed my hands over them, and started counting out loud. I could hear her giggling as her bare feet slapped the hallway floor and disappeared around a corner. When I got to 20, I called out, "Ready or not, here I come," and started looking. I checked behind the couch, under the dining table, even in the bathtub with the curtain drawn shut. Nothing. She wasn't in her room either. But when I got to Mom's bedroom, the one room we weren't usually allowed in, the door was slightly open. Lydia had always been curious about it, especially the giant mirrored closet doors on the far wall. I figured she was hiding in there and just didn't think I'd look. The light was off, but enough from the hallway spilled in to make out shapes. I walked straight to the closet, slid one side open, and called out, "Found you." Something moved in the back. The closet was packed with hanging clothes, the kind of old stuff Mom never wore but wouldn't throw out. Heavy jackets, old dresses, worn blouses with shoulder pads. They shifted ever so slightly, like someone had just brushed past them. I stepped closer, parting the fabric with my hands. "Come on, Lydia, you're not that hard to find." I reached my hand between the coats to grab her arm, and something grabbed me back. It wasn't like a playful tug. It didn't feel like Lydia. The hand that latched onto my wrist was cold, not cool, not clammy. Cold, dead cold, and tight. I froze. I couldn't even see the hand clearly through the wall of fabric, but I felt each finger wrap around me with this slow, deliberate pressure, like it had been waiting. At first, I thought maybe Lydia was trying to scare me, so I yanked my hand back, laughing nervously. "Okay, funny, let go." But the grip only got stronger. I started to panic. I pulled harder, tried to twist away, but the hand didn't budge. It was like it had grown from the closet itself. I couldn't move. That's when I heard a voice behind me. Small, innocent. "What are you doing in Mom's room?" I turned my head and my stomach dropped. Lydia was standing in the doorway. My brain didn't catch up right away. I looked back and forth. Lydia at the door, the freezing hand still clutching my wrist through the closet clothes. And it just didn't make sense. I could barely speak. My voice came out in a whisper. "Lydia?" She just stared at me, wide-eyed. "Why are you in the closet?" I started screaming. I don't know how long I did. Lydia ran to me, pulling at my arm while I thrashed and kicked. Finally, the grip loosened. I stumbled backward and fell, dragging Lydia with me. The closet clothes swayed like they'd been disturbed by a breeze, but there was no air moving. I got to my feet and slammed the closet doors shut without looking inside again. We didn't talk. We just ran out of the room and down the hallway, out the front door into the hot night air. I didn't realize I'd left it unlocked, but I didn't care. We sat on the curb, both of us shaking. Lydia kept asking what had happened, but I couldn't give her an answer. I didn't understand it myself. When Mom got home just after midnight, we were still sitting outside. I don't know what she thought. Maybe that I was being irresponsible or that Lydia had a nightmare. But when she saw our faces, she didn't yell. She just brought us inside and made us sit in the living room with the lights on. I tried to tell her what happened, but it sounded ridiculous even as I said it. She checked the closet herself, pulled everything out, turned on the lights. Nothing. Just clothes, dust, a few shoeboxes. She said maybe I had a dream, or maybe I'd gotten caught on a coat and scared myself. But I know what I felt. It wasn't cloth. It wasn't Lydia. It was a hand. She let us sleep in the living room that night. Neither of us wanted to go back near the bedrooms. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to rationalize it. I told myself over and over that it had to have been my imagination. Maybe I just scared myself, got disoriented in the dark. But that didn't explain the bruise on my wrist the next morning. Small, round marks like fingertip pressure. Mom noticed, but didn't say anything. I think she wanted to believe it was just an accident. The next few days, things felt off in the house. Lydia kept saying she heard someone walking around at night, but I told her it was probably the pipes or the fan. I tried to act normal, but every time I walked past that bedroom door, I felt something watching. Not just from inside, from behind the walls, from inside the structure itself. Like something was hiding, pressed just out of sight. Then things started disappearing. First it was Lydia's favorite stuffed animal, then the remote, then a pair of my socks, followed by a hairbrush. All little things, things that could have just been misplaced. But we never found them. Not under furniture, not behind beds. Gone. Like the house had swallowed them. I started having dreams. At first they were scattered. Dim images of the closet, of the door slowly creaking open on its own. Then they got clearer. I saw the inside of the closet, except it wasn't full of clothes. It was hollowed out, the back wall removed, and behind it stretched a narrow passage, dark, cramped, made of wooden slats and beams. In the dream, I was always crawling through it, scraping my elbows and knees on old nails and splinters. And there was always someone ahead of me, just out of reach. Not Lydia. Someone else. Something else. I'd wake up soaked in sweat, my hands aching like I'd been pulling at something in my sleep. Then one night, I heard the closet door slide open. I wasn't dreaming. Lydia and I were sleeping in the living room again. I heard it clearly. The quiet wooden scrape, like the door being pulled open slowly. I sat up. My heart was hammering. The hallway was dark, but I could make out the shape of the bedroom door, slightly ajar. I wanted to wake Lydia, but I couldn't move. It was like something was willing me to stay silent. There were soft footsteps, not on the floor, but higher up, like someone was walking along the ceiling beams. I heard them pass above us, slow and steady, then stop. And then the whispering started. It was coming from inside the walls. The whispering wasn't words. Not really. It was too soft, too fast, like dozens of mouths moving at once just beneath the surface of the drywall. I couldn't make out anything clear, just the cadence, the rise and fall of voices that didn't sound human. Lydia stirred beside me and opened her eyes, confused, but she didn't say anything. Maybe she heard it too. Maybe she just knew not to ask. I barely slept that night. When the sun came up, the sound stopped. I sat there, hugging my knees until Mom came out of her room, looking tired but oblivious. Lydia said nothing. Neither did I. What was I going to say? That our walls were whispering? That someone had walked across the ceiling? That same day, while Mom was at work, I decided to face the closet again. I don't know what I thought I was going to find, but I had to prove something to myself. Lydia was watching cartoons, and I told her not to follow me. I went into Mom's room, stood in front of the closet, and slid the doors open slowly. The smell hit me first. Musty, stale, like wet dirt. Not mold, not something that belonged in a house. It smelled like the inside of a tomb. I started pushing the clothes aside again, all the way to the back wall. That's when I noticed it. There was a seam, a thin line where the paneling in the back didn't quite match up. I pressed on it. It gave a little. I pressed harder and felt it shift slightly inward. The wood creaked, and then, to my shock, a small square door about 2 feet high swung open, revealing darkness behind it. There was a crawl space behind the closet. I stood there staring at it, heart pounding. It was like the opening from my dreams. Narrow, black, pulsing with the kind of stillness that feels loud. I reached my hand in without thinking and felt the air change. It was colder, heavier. I could hear the distant, dry scuttling of something moving away deeper inside. I didn't dare go in. I shut the panel and closet doors and walked out of that room, locking the bedroom door behind me. That night, Lydia had another nightmare. I found her crying in the hallway, saying someone was whispering her name from the walls. I sat with her for hours until she fell asleep again. I knew something was wrong with this house. Maybe always had been, and I just hadn't noticed until I started paying attention. The next day, Mom got called in to a double shift. It meant Lydia and I would be alone overnight. She wasn't happy about it, but we didn't have a choice. I didn't want to scare Lydia by telling her what I'd found, so I just told her we'd have a camp night in the living room. We made a fort out of couch cushions and watched movies until she passed out. I stayed awake. I couldn't help it. I watched the hallway all night. The closet door didn't open again. The house was quiet. Too quiet. At some point, I must have dozed off. I woke up to the sound of whispering. But this time, it wasn't from the walls. It was right behind me. I turned around slowly, barely breathing. The blankets and cushions behind me were shifting. At first, I thought Lydia was just moving in her sleep, but then I saw her. She was still curled up under the blanket on the opposite end of the room. Whatever was behind me wasn't her. Something lifted the cushion beside me, just slightly, like it was testing its weight. Then it went still again. I crawled backwards until I was at Lydia's side, gently waking her up. I whispered for her to stay quiet. Her eyes widened when I pointed at the cushions. We both stared. One of them slid off the pile with a soft thump. We bolted. I didn't care what time it was. I grabbed Lydia's hand, pulled her out the front door, and we ran barefoot to the neighbor's house. I banged on their door until the porch light came on and they let us in. I made up some excuse, something about someone trying to break in. They called the police. Officers came, checked the house, found nothing. But I knew where it had come from. The crawl space, the thing behind the closet. Mom was furious that I'd woken the neighbors and called the cops, but when she saw how serious I was, she calmed down. I told her everything. The hand, the dreams, the panel in the closet. She didn't believe me. She said it was probably a raccoon or a squirrel. That maybe I'd fallen asleep and imagined the rest. But she checked the closet herself. She even tried the panel. It didn't open for her. She said there was no door, that it was just a wall. But I know what I saw. I touched it. I felt the space behind it. She said maybe I'd been sleepwalking, that sometimes kids imagine things when they're overtired. Lydia tried to back me up, but Mom brushed it off. Things got worse after that. We started hearing scratching in the vents at night. Lights would flicker for no reason. Lydia swore her toys were being rearranged while she slept. One night, I woke up and found all the closet doors in the house open. Every single one. I shut them all, but one, Mom's closet, wouldn't stay closed. I had to wedge a chair under the handle to keep it shut. The house wasn't just haunted, it was infested. And whatever was here wasn't trying to scare us, it was trying to be us. I don't know how else to explain it. Lydia started acting weird. Not all the time, just in flashes. I'd find her sitting in the hallway staring into space. Once I caught her whispering to her closet with the door cracked open just enough for her breath to slip through. When I asked what she was doing, she said, listening. Another time, she asked me why I always called her Lydia. That's not my name, she said, voice flat. Not anymore. It stopped me cold. I tried to laugh it off, told her not to be weird. But she just looked at me, not angry, not sad, like I was something unfamiliar. That night, she locked herself in Mom's bedroom. I heard the closet door sliding open. I heard her whispering something to it. Or someone. The language didn't sound real. I pounded on the door for what felt like hours until Mom came home and opened it herself. Lydia was asleep on the floor, her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't remember anything. But I did. The last night we spent in that house was the one that broke everything. I woke up around 2 a.m. The room was dark. Too dark. I couldn't see Lydia anywhere. I called out for her. Nothing. I got up, checked the bathroom, the kitchen, her room. Empty. I was about to check the backyard when I noticed something strange. Mom's bedroom door was open, and the light in the closet was on. It glowed faintly from the cracks in the mirrored door, like someone had set up a lamp behind the clothes. I stepped inside, calling for Lydia. Are you in here? Nothing. I pushed the closet door open. The panel at the back was gone. There was only darkness beyond the hanging clothes, and from within it, I heard my name. But it wasn't Lydia's voice. I ran. I didn't even think. I ran straight out the front door and down the street until I found someone awake. A man watering his lawn in his pajamas, confused, half asleep. I told him my sister was gone, that something had taken her. He called the cops. They came, searched the house, no sign of her. They said she must have run away. But I know what happened. I saw the light in the crawl space. I heard the voice that wore my name like a mask. I know something was in that closet. Something that never wanted to be found. A week later, Lydia came back. Or someone who looked like her. She was quiet, smiling too much, her eyes too wide. She doesn't blink right, she doesn't move right. Mom says it's trauma, that I should give her time. But I sleep with the door locked now, because she keeps standing outside it in the dark. Just waiting.